Okay, so let's now rig the torso for the character. And this is actually going to be very pretty straightforward. Well, we're not rigging yet, we're just creating the guide rig. But let's create the joints for the torso. And so one thing I'm going to do is just to have a clearer view, I'm just going to hide all the joints that we've worked on so far. So they're out of view, so we can focus on the torso. And I'm going to shift to right view, and let's go to wireframe mode. So we're going to create actually 3 joint chains. One for the torso, one for the neck and head, and one for the jaw. And we're going to leave those there until we come back to start rigging the character. So let's begin with the torso, and we want to create a joint chain that goes more or less from here, a little bit below the waistline, all the way over to the base of the neck. And we want to create it as straight and evenly spaced as possible. So there's a few tricks to get around that. So first, let's just start clicking. And just one thing that is peculiar about this character, if I go back to perspective and shaded view, is that, as you can see, his back is very narrow in this area. So you want to be careful around where you place the joints so that they're not too close to the back. So we got to be careful about that. Let's go back to right view, wireframe. And as you can see, here's the arc for the back. So even if our joint chain is going to be slightly rotated, we want to be sure we're not too close to the edge of the back over there. So let's click here, and if your joints are not too evenly spaced, don't worry too much about it. For now, that's all we're going to do. Just try to create, in this case, I have 7 joints, which means I have 6 segments over here, 6 bones, so to speak. And then we drop the tool, and that's it. Now let's get this joint chain a little bit better in terms of the distance between the joints. And to do this, what we're going to do is to get them evenly spaced, we're going to select all the joints except the first one, and we're going to change their position in the z-axis, because as you can see, that moves them up and down. So let's set for example 70 millimeters. So that makes them evenly spaced. Now they all have the same distance from one to the other. And now we can use the spinner to position them so that this guy reaches the base of the neck. And right now he's a little bit too high. So let's bring that down to like there. Okay. So once you have this, let's go to perspective view and make sure we're good. Yeah, there it is, our joint chain in the middle of the character. We need to make sure the rotations are not too bad. From what I saw, we can see that the joint orientations are okay. We're still gonna realign the pivots of the joints, because we want, remember, the x-axis to run up the joint. But before doing so, we need to fix the channels. So we're gonna merge them again, and I'm gonna do one just to refresh your memory to what we were doing, and then gonna pause the video and do the rest and come back, because I mean, we don't need to go through this exercise all the time. So I just grab the joint, go up to channels, grab the secondary rotation transform, shift select the primary and merge them, and then delete the secondary. And that leaves us with our actual rotation values exposed. Okay, so I just remember that before doing that, I have to actually align the joints, because if not, we're gonna get again secondary transform. So let's select the entire chain and go to align, and we're going to use, remember, X direction z-axis. So click on OK. And that's pretty much good. We know that our primary rotation is in Z, which in this case it's going to be, well, not this one, because as you can see, the last joint in the chain is not properly oriented, but we don't have to worry about him. But this is the actual rotation we're going to get, which is going to be our primary, which is what we want. Then this would be like the second most important one, and finally the twist one, which we need to take care of, otherwise we'll run into gimbal lock. Okay, so now that I've done this, I'm going to, as I said, fix the channels. Well, actually this guy stay fixed. I'm gonna fix the rest and come back and show you what's coming up. Okay, I'm done. I cleaned up all the channels for all the objects, and I also took the time to rename the entire joint chain. As you can see, now they are called JNT for joint, underscore C for center. Now it's at the center of the character, and spine 01 all the way through to spine 07. So that's done. Now the only thing I'm going to do is correct this little guy over here by resetting its rotation, and now it's facing the same way as everybody else. And there's one thing that we need to consider at this point, and as you probably noticed as I was drawing the chain, the joints are not exactly on a straight line from here all the way to over here. There's minor little rotations, and now that I merged everything and we have the actual rotation values exposed, we could fix those. But if I do that, like you can see, for example, that this joint has a little rotation of less than 1 degree, leaning towards the back. Same for him, half a degree. This guy, half a degree. This guy is almost 2, and this guy is a little bit over 2. So we got those because we were trying to more or less follow the overall shape of the torso. The thing that this will do is when I rotate the character on the x-axis, you will see that the topmost joint, this one over here, moves a little bit. It's not exactly staying at the same position. It's wobbling a little, and that's because of those rotations that we have. So for him to stay in exactly the same place, this would have to be totally straight. But in the case of this particular character, for us to do that, it means that the entire chain would have to be rotated a little to lean towards the back. Okay, and that means our torso is not gonna, when we twist them in the x-axis, it's not gonna rotate on a plane. It's gonna rotate a little bit, arcing towards one side or the other. So we have to make a trade-off here between being able to rotate the torso perfectly vertically, or having it slightly slanted when it rotates on its x-axis, because of the orientation of the joint chain. So what I'm going to do in my case is I am going to see what happens first if I take all the joints except the first one, and I do a reset rotation so they're all perfectly straight. And now I will take the first joint in the chain and rotate him a little bit so they're back to, this guy is as close as possible to the original position he had. So let's say he needs to go there. And now let's rotate everything and see what that looks like on the x-axis. So now we have no movement on the topmost joint, and I don't think the inclination of the chain is that pronounced to have this become a problem. So I'm going to leave things like that. I'm going to leave the chain entirely straight, even though I have this guy pointing a little bit towards the back. So we're done. We're done with the torso. Let's do the neck and head. So I'm gonna go back to my right view, and we're going to start the joint chain from more or less around here and create two joints for the neck. I don't want to click directly on top of this joint because then I'm going to be creating my my neck joint chain as a child of this joint over here. So I'm going to click a little bit on the side, and then later we could fix that if we want to put it directly on top. So let's do that. Let's create our joint chain starting more or less around here. And the next joint has to be like, imagine his skull is over here inside of his head. So the base of the skull would be somewhere around here. And we're going to finish the joint chain by clicking outside of the head. And that's it. And let's also create, since we're at it, the joint for the jaw, which should be, as if you dig up some anatomy references, you will see that the our jawbone usually anchors somewhere around here at the base of the ear. So let's click right there, and let's click out here, and we're done. Oops. So now that we're done, we need to align these guys. So let's grab this joint chain, and as you can see right now, Z is pointing upwards. We want X, and Y is pointing to the back. So let's do our alignment, and in this case we have it okay, but Y is pointing to the back, and on the spine Y is pointing forward. So since this is an independent chain, that's not too much of a problem, but just to keep things consistent, let's set this to Z, and we get Y pointing forward, which is good. And now let's align this guy, and yeah, we're good. We just need to fix the end joints, but before doing so, I need to merge again my channels. So give me a second, I'll just do that. Okay, my channels have been merged, and now I need to maybe move things a little bit. So I'm gonna grab him, use the move tool, go to local, let's go to the tool properties. Yeah, no child compensator or anything crazy over there. Usually, if you remember, you've seen me get to these properties by using the modeling panel, which also has them. I personally just do that because I like to have both panels side by side if needed. But if you don't really need this, you can just go to the second tab over here and you'll find them there. So let's move this guy a little bit downwards so it meets with the last bone. And actually, you know what? You could just do drop action match position, and then just drag and drop this guy into here with the right mouse button, and now they're matched in position. But we have to rotate him back to get the neck bone back to the base of the skull, and that looks pretty good. Maybe him. No, he's okay. So we're good. We're done with this, and I'm just going to parent this guy to the head joint in place, so that now whenever I rotate this joint, the jaw follows, as you can see. And we're good. The last thing I'm gonna do to finish this is let's reset the rotations on this guys, and let's rename everything. Let's see, where are we? There you are. So let's rename these guys, and I'm gonna do that very quickly, and I'll show you what I got. So I'm done. All I did was rename the first joint to center neck, then the next one is center head, And the next one, this last one over here, is center head end. I call these guys ends because all they do is give us a visual reference of where the bone would be, being this visual representation being the bone. Because these guys aren't really going to do much for us, since the head is going to be animated with FK, and so is the jaw. We'll get into that further down the road. Then these joints have actual little use if it's not for the visual representation they provide. So I just like to label them like that to know that they are just ends. They don't really do anything else. And also, if I get to a point where I really don't need them anymore, I can just delete them and nothing will change. So that's the only reason why I add this suffix to their name. And that's pretty much it. We're done with the torso and the head. Let's take a look. We have a little problem here. As you can see, the jawbone is not centered. So let's move it back. Let's move it back to 0. There you go. Sometimes the construction plane in Modo shifts a little bit depending on the scale of the scene and how zoomed in you are and stuff like that. So always make sure you can check what you're doing in the perspective view or in different viewports too, to make sure that things are positioned where they should. The rest of the characters is fine. So now that this is done, we can proceed to start creating the guide rig for the legs. So let's get to that. Okay, let's start doing the legs for our character. The first thing I'm going to do is let's hide those chains we had already done. And since I'm going to be working down here, I'm going to hide the shield. Here he is, so let's just hide that. And the way I'm going to do this, let's go to a left view and wireframe, is we're going to create a bone chain starting from here that goes all the way down the leg, and we're going to continue it down the feet. And the reason why we're doing both as a single bone chain is, given how our feet move in relation to our leg, there's very little free motion that our feet can do like from the leg. And it's not like our hands, where you can put your hand on the table and then still move your arms quite a bit, and the hand is still going to be glued to the table basically. With our feet, we have very little free motion, so moving our leg around is going to move our foot a lot. So we're going to do an IK setup that basically allows the leg and the feet to work together to get a proper walking motion. So that's why we're doing just a single bone chain instead of two, one for the leg and one for the foot, as we've done with the arm and hand. So let's just do that. I'm gonna go to the skeleton tool, and I'm gonna start my bone chain from around where the leg would join the hip. So around here, then go down to the knee, the ankle, where the ball of the foot would be, and the end of the toes. And these two guys I'm gonna get right on the ground. And let's just hit Q to drop the tool, go back to perspective, and you'll see that you have a bone chain that runs down exactly excuse me, down the middle of the character. So we're gonna move this guy to one side and then mirror it as we've done before, but we're gonna use a little trick here to have an easier time doing this and avoiding some nasty rotations to deal with later on, which is we're going to assign it to a parent that we're going to use to transform the whole chain, and then just mirror those transforms easily from one side to the other. Because the problem we have when we flip stuff from one side to the other with joints is that, remember that the other side we have to realign it to have a completely different axis orientation so that we can have mirrored motions, and that makes rotations a little bit difficult to deal with later on. But if we have a single parent that does not go through this flipping exercise, then mirroring the transforms is easier. You're going to see a little bit more of that, what I'm talking about. But for now, I'm going to create a locator, and I'm going to set my drop action to insert, and I'm just going to drag and drop it onto, oops, I have compensation on. Let's turn it off, drag and drop it here. And now it moves over to the exact position and rotation of this object, and it becomes its parent. So that's what we have right now. This is the guy we're going to use to position our bone chain. Before jumping onto that, you know what we have to do? We have to fix the channels. So give me 1 second. Okay, I'm done with the channel cleaning. So let's take again the parent and move it aside to where the leg would need to be. More or less around there, I would say. And now what we're going to do is, as you can see, we have to rotate the leg into position. But before I do that, I'm going to definitely run the align tool, because as you can see, all the axes right now are pointing anywhere. So we're gonna just go with the settings we've used so far, XZ and X for the up vector, and everything is good. Z is pointing forward, Y is pointing to the side, except for this guy. This guy we don't care too much for now. We're gonna fix him later. Okay, so now let's go back to grabbing this guy, and let's rotate him into position. We need to point the leg a little bit out, not too much though. And we want to get the knee in its proper area, and the ankle too. So right now I'm just getting them as close as possible, because the knee would have to be a little bit more to the left, but the ankle has to stay here. So that means we will have like a broken and non-planar leg, and we definitely don't want that, unless you want your character to walk like a cowboy, but we don't want that for him. So we're just gonna leave that rotation in there like that. And now with this guy selected, we just go and use the mirror hierarchy tool. So there we go. It appears to be okay. So let's see what we got. Everything is fine. And let's see what our axes are looking like. So let's take this guy and this guy, and we're going to rotate them the way we've done before. Up, we have something bizarre happening there. And the reason is this guy has negative scale. So let's bring him back to our normal world. Now everything looks okay. Let's try rotating again. Nope, that's not what we want. This is not either what we want, so we have to flip Z and Y. So let's do that. Let's grab these guys and use our align tool. Same settings but with negative axes, and it looks like that worked. Let's try that again. Yes, that's good. That's what we want. This is fine too. So now that we're done with this, as you can see, it was much easier to do. We can just get rid of those locators. They just helped us to deal with transforms in an easier way because they're not flipped. So if there was anything that I needed to do to this guy that I needed to adjust after I had mirrored everything, I can just copy the values, because as you can see, the transforms on one side matched the transforms on the locator on the other side perfectly. It's just the signs that we have to adjust. In this case here we have 2 negative signs, one for the position, and here we have none. So but right now we don't have to change anything. So now what we can do is take these 2 bones, turn on compensation, and say unparent in place, and everything still working. So everything is good. We can get rid of those locators. Select them, delete them, and as you can see, the rotations on this bone now don't look like anything like the rotations on this side, and the reason is the axis alignment. So it's a lot easier to deal with stuff doing it the way we just did it than if we had just plain mirrored and then try to adjust anything that needed to be adjusted. So that's another neat little trick that we can use. Obviously I'm trying to show you as much as possible. In the course we started by doing the arms the what would be the normal way, let's call it, and this is with a helping hand from some locators. So there you go, our legs are done. All I need to do is come in and rename these joints. You know how that's going to go, the names they're gonna have. You can do it on your own. I'm gonna stop the video right here, and in the next video we're going to assemble our guide rig. Okay, see you over there. Okay, we're ready to assemble our guide. So as you can see, everything is renamed properly. You can restart from the join guide start.lxo scene if you want. And let's unhide everything else we've done. There you go. So that's our guide rig. We're still missing a few things to be able to put this together, but it's not too much. We're gonna do it right now. So the first thing is to join the legs together. We're gonna need a object for our hip. So we're gonna use a plain old locator and move it up here to where more or less where the legs are. This is gonna be the point for our hip, and let's move it in. There you go. And let's call it joint center hip. Okay. And we're gonna change its display. Let's make it a nice little sphere, not solid, and quite smaller than that. But we want it to be slightly bigger than the ones on the legs, so that we know it's the hip. Now we're gonna take these 2 guys and the hip joint we just created, compensation on, parent in place, and now all the legs are under the hip. All the legs, well, yeah, both legs. It's not like he has many. Now let's do the same for our character's arms, but he's missing something very important. That would be a clavicle. We need a clavicle to join the arms to the torso, because when you move your arms, if you move your arms up and down as you watch yourself in the mirror, you will see that your clavicle is guiding your arms up and down and backward and forward. So we definitely want our friend to have a clavicle. So let's give him one. Let's go to our front view, and the clavicle, it's going to start from this point all the way over to the shoulder. That's what it's going to do. And actually it ends up around here. Let's take a look at that. We're definitely going to need to adjust our arm bones. I'm actually glad we did them this short. we're going to move them up here. And we're going to be looking at how to determine if the pivot points for your joints are in the correct location or not once we get into the formations, and how to adjust them if they're not without screwing up our deformations. So I'm actually going to leave that for later. Let's see, I'm going to get rid of the gear. There you go. Let's draw a clavicle bone. So we're going to go from here to around there. And now let's see in perspective. Well, our clavicle bone is quite far. As I said, sometimes the construction plane likes to play a little bit. And we just need to bring this guy over and rotate it like so. Yeah, that should do it. Actually, a little bit more inwards. And then we're gonna take his child. Let's fix the rotations on these two so we know what we're dealing with. There we go. And let's zero him. Well, reset its rotations. And that way, you can actually move it in parent space and not misalign the clavicle. And we can rotate the clavicle down a little bit. There we go. Good. Now to mirror it, we're going to use the same old trick we used on the legs. Let's get a locator and let's insert it. Don't forget to turn off compensation. Yes. Okay, there we go. Let's make this guy smaller. Okay. Now we can, let's see first what we got with the axes on this guy. Now let's select both. Let's do our align. There you go. That looks pretty good. X running down. Fine. You always want to check when you do that to see if you have some funky rotations happening on your joints when you do align, which do happen sometimes, so keep an eye on for that. And we need to again reset this guy's rotations. Okay, now we're good. So let's take him, mirror it. Fine. Now on the mirrored side, let's take off the negative scale. That's much better. And let's check our axes again. We want to have, nope, that's not what we want. So we have to flip this guy. Align, negative axes. Let's see what that did. Yes. Yes. So we're done with this. Let's take our clavicles and compensation on parent in place. We can take the locators, delete them, and now let's rename these guys. So this is going to be joint right side clavicle, and this guy is going to be the clavicle end. And you know what, we're not gonna need it, but I'm gonna show you why later. Let's leave him in for now. the other side. Joint left clavicle and joint left clavicle end. There we go. And these guys, before we parent anything onto them, we're gonna make them the children of something, and they're gonna be obviously the child of one of the joints in the spine, which is this one. So we just select them both, select this guy, parent in place, and there we go. They're connected, and now we can parent the arm onto each clavicle over here. And as I said, we don't need this guy basically, so we can go straight for the one over here, parent in place, and this guy to this guy, parent in place. We may get rid of those later, but for now we're going to keep them for visual purposes. And our we're almost done. Now we have to take the first joint in the spine, make it a children of the hip, and we're missing the hands. So let's go to the hand. This is the hand bone. Make him a child of this last joint on the arm, and same on the other side. Parent in place. What we see is that the neck is still independent, so we're gonna make him a child of the last joint on the spine. And now if we check our items list, you'll see that the entire guide rig is sitting under the hip. So that's pretty much it. We're done. Everything is one single entity. You can double check by double clicking on the hip joint, and everything should be selected. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a we're gonna add a group locator, which is basically a folder, and we're gonna call this ACE guide rig. And let's collapse this, and we're gonna take our hip joint and put it inside of that folder, and we're done. Now our entire guide is inside of its own folder, which we're gonna keep handy for other things later on. So for now, the guide is done, and you might be asking yourself, what is going on with this area? We're gonna get back to that later on, because we're gonna do some experiments with the formations, and then we'll decide if those bones are at the right location, and if not, how to fix it. Okay, see you in the next video.